there's definitely ways to put yourself out there. And I think that there's this idea of if you put yourself out there, you might look dumb. But it's like, yeah, they might say no, but what if they say yes? What if they say, give me more information? I want to know. And then if they say, have you shot a wedding before and you haven't? Then you could say, I haven't shot a wedding before, but this is why I believe I would be great to shoot yours. And just having that confidence and being transparent as well, I think a lot of people appreciate.
Hey, welcome to episode 336 of the Beginner Photography Podcast, brought to you by CloudSpot, the easiest way to deliver and sell your photos online. I'm your host, Raymond Hatfield, and today we are chatting with wedding photographer Jasmine Blais about how to get started with booking weddings in the new year. January, February, prime time. Very busy time for wedding photographers, as according to the Knot, 68% of engagements happen between Thanksgiving and New Year's Day. So with the start of a new year, many couples get to planning their wedding and booking their wedding photographer. So this week, that's why we got on Jasmine Blais, right? She's going to share with us how to know if we are even ready to start shooting weddings. And then, of course, how to put ourselves out there if we do want to start booking weddings for the year ahead. With that, let's go ahead and get on into today's interview with Jasmine Blais. Jasmine, when did you know that photography was going to play an important role in your life?
Well, I always felt creative, but like I can't even cut straight with scissors, like it's awful. And I just kind of, in the teens, you did the awful album cover photos, and then it kind of just went from there. And it evolved in my early 20s. And then it just turned into a business. And I kind of felt like this was a way that I could serve people because I can't be a nurse. I don't do well with blood or anything like that.
Same.
So yeah, it was just a great way. I just kind of felt the joy of capturing memories for people, and that kind of just evolved into a business. And yeah, the rest is kind of history.
Okay, so I want to go back to those early days because this is, it's the Beginner Photography Podcast. We want to know about those early days. A lot of the listeners are struggling in that moment right now. So when you're that teenager and you're taking those album photos of stuff, when you go out and you use your camera, where did that come from? Did you just have a camera and you thought, I could use this, or was there an interest before that point?
Yeah, well, I had those basic digital cameras when they came out back in 2000s, dating myself a little bit here. And like I said, it was just a way to feel creative and create and feel like I was actually producing something that I felt at the time I was proud of. So that's kind of where that kind of came from. And then I enjoyed people's reactions after they saw the photos, all of the duck faces and all that kind of thing that was trending at the time. Like I loved people's reactions from that. And then when I started taking photos of people and couples and things like that, I obviously started doing that all for free. It allowed me to, again, have that creative outlet and then as well serve people and be able to make mistakes and learn and do all of those things because I wasn't being paid for it. And so it was really, really easy to fall in love with at the start.
Yeah, I agree. I like those. I kind of miss those early days sometimes. It feels a lot freer when you're just like, let's
Yeah.
just see what happens. And there's not really a lot of pressure on you. But I've shared the story on the podcast before how I went to film school, like to make movies, and then I transitioned into photography. You had a similar pivot at some point. You went to school to be a teacher, right?
Yeah, I did. So there's actually a lot of teachers in my family. It's funny. My brother-in-law is both married teachers. My mother-in-law is a teacher. My grandma's a teacher, and my grandpa was a teacher as well. And it was a natural path for me. I really enjoyed it, and I still do. Right now, I'm not teaching, but it kind of, again, was another way to serve people. And photography kind of just happened organically in the sense of it turning into a business. Like my now husband had bought me my first DSLR camera back in the day when you used to spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars on your significant other, and then you get married and then you kind of just try to
Yeah.
remember when the anniversaries are. Yeah.
I
So
got you socks.
yeah. So like I said, it kind of just evolved from there. And then when I kind of realized that this was something that I could potentially do for people and then also have an income and invest my time and money and stuff into that as well, it was exciting. It was really scary too at the time. Like I didn't have any kids. And so it was easier to take risks, but my risks that I was taking, they weren't really risks when I look back at the time. In your early 20s, you're still trying to figure life out. So I was navigating my new teaching career while also trying to explore this photography career. So that kind of got put on the back burner while I was trying to get my career, my teaching career, my salary and my benefits and
Of
all that
course.
stuff figured out. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are going to be able to relate to that. I think looking at the analytics of this show, I think that the average age of the listener is in their late 30s to early 40s. And I think because of that, there are a lot of people who did enter the workforce and now are finding photography either as a creative outlet or a potential career as
Yeah.
well. But you had mentioned you found that you kind of got to this point in your photography where you realized, oh, this could be something. I want to know more about that decision to leave your career. You went to school to become a teacher. That has got to be a really scary decision to make.
Yeah, and actually, so I transitioned to a half-time contract about 6 years ago. That in itself, I would say, was probably more of a scary route for me because the idea of veering away from tradition and safety and a salary and stuff was very scary to me. And again, at the time, like we had no kids. So my idea was that if I was going to make a leap into a half-time contract, now would be the time to do it without any kind of dependence, just my husband and myself. And then we had our first child, and we had both of our kids in the midst of COVID. And so I was teaching from home at one point, and then after we had our second child, and she's coming up on a year actually, just season of life, and it just kind of seemed to fit. I invested a lot in education. I had a very big mindset shift. Kids kind of do that to you, where you kind of see life in a different perspective and kind of, they kind of become your why in your business. This is why I'm doing this. This is why I'm taking this risk, or why I'm investing this money in it. And so I made the decision this year actually to take a step back and really focus on my business. I invested in a very great wedding photography business course called the Business Math with Jai Long. And then I also invested in a great course called the Jenny Maroney Mastermind, and that was all about course creation. And so I really took a leap, and I really financially as well as time and trying to figure this all out. And it's been very freeing
Mm.
to feel like you have this, you're the manager of your time. And it's a great feeling. And I think now seeing that transition and being able to do it, and I mean, I'm still in the midst of it. It is new. It's still, I'm always coming back to my why on those hard days, and that's my kids and my values, and it keeps you in check when those hard days come.
That is awesome. What
Yeah.
I picked up from that is that even though you haven't been shooting for like 40 years or whatever, you're still in it and you have the experience, but being able to have a community, like a support community around you through the educational platforms that you have invested in, I'm sure that has got to help out a ton, especially sometimes when it feels like I've said this before, I didn't go to business school. Like I had to figure these things
Mm-hmm.
kind of out on my own. So being able to have somebody
Mm-hmm.
who you can reach out to and ask questions, and I know that it does give you that confidence, which is extremely helpful. But from the photography side, that is still a big decision to take the leap to step back from teaching. I guess I want to know a little bit more about weddings. How long have you been shooting weddings, and kind of where are you at in your business at this stage?
Yeah. So my first wedding was 2014. And, as all first weddings go, I think it was around 400 or 500 bucks. Pretty sure I shot in program mode for some of the
Hmm.
time. Like, just that sense of panic a little bit in certain situations. Obviously wasn't like super prepared for it. That kind of just happened. And then it kind of evolved from there. And now I don't know if it's like when you turn 30, I kind of felt like this whole identity shift happened where
Yeah.
you just kind of feel a little bit more confident in yourself, and you kind of, what you want, your values are a little bit more clear. That is kind of when I felt like my wedding photography business started to take off. Even though I had been shooting weddings since 2014, I turned 30 in 2020. It felt like I was able to say yes to more things and take risks and all that stuff. So I would say in the last couple of years, maybe three or so years, I've really fallen in love with wedding photography, and just because, not to sound, I guess, dark or something like that, but people only get together for weddings or funerals nowadays.
Yeah.
And people are so scared of capturing weddings. And I just kind of look at it as it's a huge positive event that it's like, why wouldn't you want to take photos of it. I don't know. That's how
Right.
I feel.
No, I get it. You're absolutely right. Again, not to get too dark here, but I remember growing up, I lived relatively close to my grandma and some other relatives. And
Hmm.
we would see each other like every holiday, we'd get together and all that stuff. And then as you get older, you kind of move apart, you drift apart. And those are kind of those wedding years, right? So who knows how long it's been since a bride has seen her grandma or whatever it is. And this, sad to say, like this could be the last time for a long time or ever. So
Yeah.
having somebody to be there and capture that is really cool. And it is a fun experience, I can say. From my own personal experience, it is something rewarding within that for sure. Back to
Yeah.
that first wedding, I want to know, you have more experience now, right? Where you are today as a photographer is in a much better place than where you were as your
Yeah.
first wedding. When you think back
Yeah.
to that first wedding, what is something that you wish that you could have told yourself before you had showed up to shoot it, to have a better experience or capture it better?
Yeah. I think the first thing that I would say would be like, calm down, like
Yes.
relax. Like I would say the biggest obstacle is yourself. You could know every kind of technique and strategy in the book, but I mean, if you just don't really have any confidence in yourself, you're not going to go any further because you're your own limitations. So I think back then I would definitely tell myself to just kind of relax and trust yourself and practice using manual a bit more before you jump into a wedding.
Oh, interesting. So that was actually going to be my next question is that, well, I guess let's talk about your new training a little bit here. It is called Keeping Wedding Photography Simple. And within it, you have broken down, I guess, booking your first wedding. I guess before I butcher it, can you tell me a little bit more about the program?
No, 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 you're doing good. So yeah, so it's called Keeping Wedding Photography Simple, how to book, shoot, and deliver your first wedding. It can actually apply to more than just somebody that hasn't shot a wedding before, but it's for people that are trying to get into that wedding photography business and they feel intimidated, they don't know where to start. How do you jump into something that you've never done before and have people trust you to shoot it, kind of thing? And then a lot of people just kind of rely on somebody just asking them, and you could just be waiting forever if that's kind of what you do. So this is all about taking that initiative to book it yourself. And yeah, and I do want to say also, with education and things like that, we live in this world where things need to be so right now and happen right away. And I think that that is leading to a lot of people not getting to where they want to be because they just kind of, I guess, quit, you could say, or they see a failure as not a lesson. And so I think a lot of what I've learned in the last 3 or so years of this whole mindset shift is that it takes a lot of work. And booking your first wedding might take some weeks, might take some months. And that's what I kind of talk about in this course is that this is the strategies that I have used. These are the ones that I believe will help you because I have learned from them, but this may take some time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is something that a lot of people need to understand.
Yeah, that is a very big thing. I remember when I first got into weddings thinking like, you get so excited during the booking phase, right? Hey, I just booked it. Somebody trusts me to show up and shoot their wedding. Now I have a year until the wedding and I just kind of sit around, it's like, what do I do? And that's a big
Yeah.
question. You mentioned earlier about how one of the things that you wish that you had done before that first wedding is kind of study manual a little bit more and be more comfortable with it. So that question that I wanted to ask is there's a lot of people who get started in photography, they fall in love with it, and they really want to get into shooting weddings, but they kind of don't know what they need. They don't know
Yeah.
they don't know what the litmus test is to determine whether or not they're ready to shoot a wedding. So,
Mhm.
maybe if you could spend a minute talking about what is needed, maybe from a gear standpoint and
Yeah.
perhaps technical abilities as well.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, I think obviously the biggest thing is understanding how to shoot in manual because in weddings you're put in all different lighting situations. So I think understanding manual, the photographic triangle, that's one of the biggest things that I would recommend for technical, standpoint because obviously every wedding is an outdoors, but despite what Pinterest tells you, but
Yes.
or what's on Pinterest. So yeah, manual will be the biggest thing. As for gear, and I do go over this in my course, it's a lot simpler than what people think. And I was like notorious when I started for buying any gear that I thought would make my photography better when in fact I just needed to learn things more.
Yeah.
I was kind of those impulsive buyers like, well, I'm going to get this flash because Google tells me it's a great flash, but I already have a flash that I don't know how to use, but I'm just going to get this new one. and think that that's going to solve the problem of not understanding how to use a flash. So, it was just one of those things where it's just like, oh, I'll just get all this great gear and that's going to make me a great photographer. And it's like, that's not how that works. But like, definitely having two bodies is a must. I don't shoot with two bodies all the time, but you never know, obviously, when a camera is going to fail. So having a couple of different lenses is always great for focal length. Batteries. I always say if you think you have enough batteries, get two more because you just don't know. Batteries fail, all that stuff. Memory cards, again, dual slots. That's what I actually go over as well. Because one of the things that I hear all the time is, what if we have memory card failure? What if we have this? So you're like, you know what? There's a lot of things that can happen in a wedding. There's a lot of things that can happen when a pilot flies a plane. That doesn't stop them from flying a plane.
Yes.
It doesn't stop people from shooting a wedding. It's just about being prepared and doing all the things in your end to minimize the chance of any of that happening. So a dual camera slot is great to have. But I would say is getting familiar with your camera and in different lighting situations, fluorescent lighting, those dark churches, stuff like that. Because ultimately you don't really have a choice where people are getting married. You can suggest all you want, but at the end of the day, it's not your choice. So.
Hey, Raymond here, and we will get back to today's show in just a moment. Do you want your photos to have more life? Do you want to know exactly what camera settings to use and why? Well, professional photographers all over the world capture beautiful images by shooting in manual mode. Why? Because it unlocks your camera's full potential. But how do you know what settings you should use? Well, I want to break that down for you in my free ebook, Picture Perfect Camera Settings, which you can download over at perfectcamerasettings.com. In the book, I'm going to share different lighting situations that you'll find yourself in, and photos that I've captured with real camera settings, and how to know which settings to change to get the look that you want. So don't wait. Download your free copy over at perfectcamerasettings.com to unlock your camera's full potential. Now, let's get back to today's interview. I think it's funny. I think we as photographers we can have this self-inflated ego of ourselves, like, oh, to get the best photos, you have to get married in a situation like this, and we got to do that. And we kind of get angry when we have to show up and the church has wood walls, and it's like stained wood. It's dark, and then it's like same with the ceiling, and you're like, what is going on here? And then the only light source is like a stained glass window, and it's purple, and you're like, this has got to be a joke. But at the end of the day, like you said, I mean, we have to realize that, well, this is their wedding. Like, we can do our best to educate them, like, to some degree. But at the end of the day, they are the ones making the decision on their wedding day. And we can't change those things. And I think that there has to be a level of understanding, not only on our part, but on the couple's part, that this is what you get, Totally just lost my train of thought. I was thinking how horrible it would be to shoot in another church like that with the dark walls and everything.
Well, and I was going to say too, like, obviously offering suggestions and stuff because they do like to hear it. But don't come off as in if you don't do this, it's going to look awful or anything like that. And I mean, it's kind of like when that idea, like when people get upset about the weather during a wedding day, or I should say a photographer or a vendor, it's just like, well, that's something you can't control. I mean, be upset, I guess, for 5 minutes, but then get over it and go to your plan B kind of thing. I actually always travel around with clear umbrellas in the back of my vehicle. I think I have about 8 of them because I'm just like, you know what? Sometimes stuff happens.
And when you can do that, guess who's the hero? It's you.
Yeah.
It is you. Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to also bring up the idea, or the question rather, is that I know that a lot of people getting into photography, maybe before they shoot a wedding, they're probably shooting with, and I know a lot of listeners have a camera that they picked up at Costco. They're really excited to get into photography, but maybe it doesn't have dual card slots. Maybe it doesn't, it's not perfect in low light situations. So before we buy a second body, before we even know if we want to shoot weddings, is there anything else that we could do to perhaps bring a second body with us?
Yeah. I mean, there's always camera companies that rent bodies or lenses and stuff if you want to try out. I haven't, just because kind of where I live and the timeline I'm getting them doesn't work. But I do know other photographers that have, and they really enjoy that. Just because, I mean, it is an investment in full frame cameras and things like that. But I mean, there's always ways to compensate for things that you don't have in your camera gear. trying to get as much natural light as you can. Using a flash. Flashes actually aren't that expensive. So attaching a flash on your camera and bouncing it off the ceiling, that's always a great way to compensate for flash. Another thing that I should say, and if people don't know, because I actually didn't know about this setting for a while, everybody should know about the Kelvin auto white, the white balance. So if you're on auto, that's fine. I shot on auto actually for years because it was just easier. But if you fool around with Kelvin and that's just your light temperature, that will help you a lot, especially in those like fluorescent buildings, those banquet halls and stuff that never have any windows and one fire escape. Having that white balance adjustment will really, really help you. And I'm pretty sure a lot of those basic cameras do have that.
Yes.
As far as I remember, my first DSLR was a T3i Rebel. Those little buggers were great. I love those cameras. Yeah,
absolutely.
they did a good job. Yeah, I would say there's definitely ways to compensate for increasing your ISO. Like I said, understanding that manual mode will really, really help you in certain situations.
Yeah, I completely agree. I remember for my first wedding, I was terrified because I think I shot it on it was a Canon 40D, and I was worried, obviously, about the lack of dual card slots and all these things, but I was really scared that the camera was just going to die for no reason on me. Of course, these irrational fears, but are entirely possible. And I brought an old film camera with me just in case. Luckily, the camera, like the 40D, didn't die, but I remember thinking, like, these photos wouldn't match up. They'd be terrible together. And then I think it was at that next wedding where I ended up renting a camera. And even though I was more comfortable with the 40D, I found it a whole lot easier to use. I think I rented the 5D Mark II at the time. And being able to use that camera like as my primary body, I think really helped because obviously now it did have the dual card slots. It was better. It had better low light performance. And then that just became the camera that I upgraded to actually after that next wedding because I was like, this is so much better. I'm just going to do that. So there should really be no excuse as to why you can't get into it. But this time of year, it's a new year. So, hey, welcome to 2023, right? This is always a very popular time for couples to get engaged with the holidays and New Year's as well. So I want to know, what can photographers do to capture that momentum and get in front of newly engaged couples?
Yeah, definitely Christmas and New Year's is a high season for engagement for sure. I think like obviously the best way is to kind of put yourself out there not in a please hire me, I want to shoot your wedding kind of desperate way, but just like I said, to put it bluntly, everybody kind of just thinks of themselves. And so when you're serving people, I think a really important thing is understanding that you're there to serve your potential couples. What do you have to offer them? Don't stand back and look at the monetary value of wedding photography, because I think when you do that, the longevity of your wedding photography career, it won't really last, because actually weddings is, it's a huge task. So you really have to enjoy it and you really have to love it in order to do it. So I would say that if you are getting inquiries or if you want inquiries, I would really focus on showing people how you can serve them, versus then just reaching out for somebody to hire you kind of thing. So that's my biggest thing. There's always things like Facebook ads and stuff like that you could do. But there's also, you can directly reach out to somebody that got engaged and talk about how you would love to shoot their wedding and all that stuff. So there's definitely ways to put yourself out there. And I think that there's this idea of if you put yourself out there, you might look dumb, but it's like, yeah, they might say no, but what if they say yes? What if they say, give me more information? I want to know. And then if they say, have you shot a wedding before and you haven't? Then you could say, I haven't shot a wedding before, but this is why I believe I would be great to shoot yours. And just having that confidence and being transparent as well, I think a lot of people appreciate.
How important is it? Because obviously that is a fear, right? What if they ask, have you shot a wedding before and you haven't? How important is it to have a portfolio of images? What can be in that portfolio if you haven't shot a wedding before, to try to, I don't want to say convince, but try to entice a couple to book you?
Yeah, exactly. And so that's actually one of my modules. That's my first module in the course, is going over like, how do you shoot a wedding if you've never shot a wedding before? And the biggest thing with that is creating a portfolio. And again, it's, well, how do you create a portfolio if you never shot a wedding? So it's about curating that work. And so it's like, creating these styled shoots. And I think that people think that there needs to be this huge, extravagant styled shoot, but that's literally not the case. Like you can go out and you can shoot a styled wedding or elopement for $50 if you wanted to. It's just about having a couple, you can get a dress off Amazon or, a local boutique or something like that, and heading out in nice location and creating that portfolio, shooting details, creating a bouquet out of wildflowers, in the ditch, stuff like that. I think people just overcomplicate it. And at the end of the day, yes, all the details and all the stuff is great, but what people really want is for you to just capture the timeline of their day, And I just think that that for this course, that's kind of what I do. Like it's a 90-minute course, 6 modules. It's not meant to be this 30-hour intensive workshop. It's just when I started shooting weddings, I felt very lost as to what direction I go. I thought if I follow a trend, somebody will just hire me, where it's just kind of like creating that portfolio, looking for the clients, and just having that confidence. Like I said, it's really a mindset thing. And, building community with other vendors and all that stuff. And that's a great way to get more wedding booking at the end. So I would say definitely start with creating a portfolio, if you have a friend that dating somebody, or maybe they're newlywed, or make it a vow renewal or whatnot. Like it's very easy, very simple to do.
Yeah, there's definitely ways to figure it out if it's really what you want to do. You don't have to just stand around and wait for somebody to ask, which is unfortunate, because I know that a lot of people on the podcast, like wedding photographers who I've interviewed, that's what they have said. Oh, well, I had a camera and people just asked. But as you just pointed out there are ways to make it happen if it's really what you want. But you also talked about the importance of confidence, having that confidence in yourself to go ahead and do this. That, I think, is something that is hard to wrap your head around, to have confidence in something that you've never done before. And I know that a lot of listeners have said that one of the things that's holding them back is that they are introverts, and that they don't think that weddings will work for them to be an introvert. I don't know where you fall on the scale, but I would love to know. And if you have any advice for quote unquote introverts.
Yeah, I'm kind of like a little bit of both. I always joke about, I'm like, Jasmine, the wedding photographer, is like how I wish I was like 100% of the time.
I said the same thing.
I'm just like on, but I know for me, like if I'm shooting a 8-hour, 9-hour, 10-hour a day wedding, the next day or a couple of days later, I need that same time to kind of be by myself and be in my own space and just kind of gain that energy back that I gave. And again, I think that just goes with understanding yourself. And I think another way, and I should say, like, if you feel like you're not really sure about it, you can always second shoot. And I go over that in my course a bit as well, as another way to kind of dip your toes into the wedding photography business, just to see if this is something that you would like to do, or even just like be an assistant. That might even be a better way to start, rather than approaching a wedding photographer and saying, hey, if you need a second shooter, because I think some people think that every wedding photographer wants a second shooter, which isn't true. But if you come and you say, hey, I'll come and assist you, I'll fluff the dress out, I'll carry your bag or something like that, there's nothing wrong with starting there just to see how a day works, and if you're exhausted after that day, maybe, I don't know, you need a little bit more stamina, I think, then. But I would say starting there and stuff would be a great way to see if this kind of works for you.
Well, let me ask, because I feel the same way about wedding Raymond. Is a very different Raymond. Was that intentional for you, or do you find that it just happens kind of naturally?
It kind of happens naturally. I mean, I would definitely say that it's funny because I'm feeling that, because when I'm at home, it's a very different, I mean, it's chaos, but I mean, kid chaos and adult chaos are totally two different things. But I find that, and especially this season, and I don't know why, last season, I came home and I would be more energized from weddings. And I think it's just maybe because I'm just taking in more of the energy rather than giving out so much as I used to kind of thing.
Right.
And also like I'm doing things, playing music when I'm taking photos, and it's not soft music. Like when we're doing like bridal party photos, like I'm playing like the high school jams and stuff. And it's funny now that I'm in my 30s, my high school jams are like they're like 12-year-old jams. So I'm like, oh, I gotta up to like 2012 or something now, because that's like we're not the '08. So
That is so funny.
yeah, and I feel like I'm finding different ways to exert that energy. And so it's actually I'm finding a lot of joy moments in the workday of a wedding.
Mhm.
And so I would say that's kind of the Jasmine or the wedding photographer part of me that I really enjoy, because I'm able to find those joyful moments in the chaos of a wedding day, I would say.
Yeah, yeah. I think a lot of it is the more that you do it, the easier it gets as well. Those first few
Yeah.
weddings are really difficult. And as I consider myself an introvert, and coming home that next day, I mean, I would just be like, nobody talk to me today. Like, I'm just going to hang out. I'm just going to sit on the couch and I'm going to do absolutely nothing. But now, like you said, I mean, I can come home the next day if there's like another family event. I'm there when we make it
Yeah.
happen, because
Yeah.
it just gets easier with time. So that's good to hear
Yeah.
that it's not just me. But I do
Yeah.
have a question from one of the listeners, because I just got an email yesterday from Mark, who asked, he actually just shot his first wedding. So he's second
Oh,
shot
nice.
with another
Yeah.
photographer, kind of as a training ground, I guess, right? To see if he even liked it. And he said that the thing that he was worried about most was missing a moment. What do you have to say about that?
I think that you need to realize that you will miss moments, because whether it's a 10-person wedding or if it's a 400 guest wedding, that you will miss moments. I think there's definitely moments that you anticipate and you know that you need to get. First kiss, walking down the aisle, those things. And then kind of everything after those must capture moments are just extra. And I think that's allowing yourself some grace. Like if you're so worried that you're going to miss a moment, you're going to realize that you shot a 10-hour wedding day and you didn't even eat,
Yes.
because you're so concerned about missing a moment. And you'll be surprised, of the moments that you actually capture. Like now, like you said, after you shoot weddings, it just becomes easier and things kind of just happen naturally. I know when I'm shooting a ceremony, the photos that nobody, or the moments that nobody sees, is a parent sitting in the front row reacting to a vows. Nobody sees that because nobody's paying attention. That's the photo that I want to get. That's the photo that my couple didn't know that they wanted. Getting ready photos, I know that I want to get a picture of the mom that's standing back watching her daughter adjust her veil in the mirror. Like, I want to get that photo because nobody's going to be watching the mom, everybody's watching the bride,
Mm-hmm.
and things like that. And you won't get every moment, and that's just the reality. But I would just say, just think of the ones that are the kind of staples: first kiss, first dance, those moments.
Yeah. I feel like it's so ridiculous almost to imagine somebody capturing every single moment. But
Mhm.
I think early on for photographers, they think that we're being hired to capture those moments. So if I miss a moment, I didn't do my job and then I fail. So I want to know, if we know that we're going to miss some moments, how do you quantify whether or not you did a good job at a wedding?
Well, like, I mean, I guess there's, if you want to talk about like this, sometimes some people have like a tangible thing, like a list, they have a shot list, I guess. If you got everything on your shot list, great. I did my job for the couple. Now I'm going to get all the photos they didn't know that they wanted, you know, that they needed. They're going to look back and they're be like, yeah, I wanted that, And for me, I feel like I did a good job if I made the experience great for my couples. One of the things that I found is so heartwarming is at the end of the day, when I say goodbye to my couples, they hug me and then they just talk about how great the day was with me, hearing things like, everybody said that you just rolled through everything so quickly, or da da da, or whatever. Or a parent goes out of their way because to say bye to you because they see you leaving and they want to, they check in to make sure you ate. And I know that sounds like a little bit, on a selfish part on my side, but I feel like giving a that kind of client experience is so beneficial for you booking any more weddings on top of that.
Mm.
I also feel that, like, my job as a wedding photographer isn't just a wedding photographer. And that's what I tell my couples. I'm your timekeeper. I'm your hype girl. I'm your best friend on that day because I'm there to make sure everything just runs smoothly and I'm there for you. So I think for me, that would be the biggest thing to know that I had a successful day because I know I can take pictures, I know I can get the shot. Sorry, this might go a little bit off task or offside, but I think the whole idea of community and competition is that a lot of photographers are scared that if they recommend another photographer, if they're booked, they're going to lose business or anything like that. But it's like there's so many photographers out there, but what makes everybody different is the experience that you give. You and I could take the exact same photo, but the experience that we give our clients are going to be completely different. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a big part of the being a wedding photographer or just any type of photographer, especially people starting out don't understand, is offering a great client experience.
Yeah, 100%. I could not agree with you anymore. But I think for some listening right now, they might be wondering, what does that mean? What does that look like? And I'm with you on the fact that, like, if the parents are asking about me, like, I'm doing a good job because they're trying to check in on me and they want to make sure that, like, I'm taken care of. If I'm doing a bad job, they're not going to ask me any questions. They're going to distance themselves from me. But what do we do to provide a standout service to our clients?
Yeah, I think just making them laugh is a big thing. Like, you can tell when somebody is stressed out or, whatever. It just, stress doesn't hide well on people. So you can see, and it's just making things lighthearted and smooth, quick, and go and run through smoothly is a great way. I use a lot of humor, mostly just making fun of myself or reading the room kind of thing like that, making fun of groomsmen or whatever. Just like I said, just keeping things lighthearted, because if they see you stress, that is a whole nother ball game for them, and obviously I still get anxious and excited and nervous on wedding days because I think that's a normal human emotion, but I kind of hold that inside and understand I have a job to do. And if listeners out there are worried, like, I am so nervous to shoot a wedding, I'm so nervous to screw up, I run out of time, all that stuff, you can always bring somebody along on the wedding day. You can have a shot list that doesn't make you look unprofessional at all. And I think that was one of my biggest things starting out, was looking like somebody was going to find me out, like I wasn't good enough to do this, And so I think just realizing, sometimes I still look at my phone if I jotted down ideas and I say that to them. If I need to adjust light, I literally stop and I say, hold on, guys, I just got to adjust my light, or I want to make sure. And that used to scare me because I used to be like, everybody's going to think I don't know what the heck I'm doing. But now I'm like, no, if you go to a doctor, they tell you what they're doing. And to me, I'm like, why does that make me look unprofessional? To me, that reassures them that I'm making sure I'm doing my job.
Yeah. That is too funny. I went through the exact same thing. Or what would be the worst is that, like, you'd set up a light and then you'd go to take the photo and be like, oh, the light is all wrong. Now they just watched me set up that whole light and now I have to go over there and change it to be something entirely different. Yeah. No. But I think that goes back to, like, keeping it light and just saying, like, you know what, guys? I screwed up. That light does not work right there. I'm going to move it over here to make you guys look good. I think that goes a long way,
Yeah.
Now, there is this phrase. I don't know if you've heard it before. I don't know if it's even a thing or if I've just heard it once and it just stuck with me. But it's this idea that once you have a job, it's easier to get another job or a different job. I don't know if you've heard this before, but how can we use our first wedding to book another wedding?
Yeah. So a big part of that is asking for a review after, 3 to 5 sentence review after you send their gallery. I think word of mouth is one of the biggest ways to put your name out there. Like, obviously social media and all that stuff is great. You can reach a wider audience. But if somebody is giving a word of mouth review to somebody else, that is hands down one of the best things that you can get, because it's a firsthand review. You're not seeing a little blurb on a website, which I think you should have, but that, I think, is one of the biggest ways, is asking for that review, using that portfolio, and then taking advantage of blog posts and using SEO. So that's search engine optimization. I always sound like a robot when I say that, but but that's a great way. And to be honest, blog posts are not my thing. That is one thing that I'm working on. So don't feel overwhelmed with that.
Especially in the beginning.
Yeah. And one thing that I think I want to kind of just say for your listeners is that relying on social media to be your only way to market yourself is not good enough, because it needs to be, the thing is that it can shut down any moment. And if you only have an Instagram page to market yourself and to say, this is what I do and this is what I can offer, you're at the mercy of an app. And it sucks because I've seen people's accounts get hacked. I've seen Instagram shut down whenever that was, earlier in 2022 or 21, I forget. And it was like the whole world shut down. Having building an email list, going directly to venues and introducing yourself, and just things like that, I think. But I would say word of mouth and asking for review is the best route to take. And then again, just building that portfolio and then getting a review from actually the portfolio experience. So if you stage it as a vow renewal, or it can be a vow renewal, ask for a review from them after on the experience of them shooting. And that's another review.
You know, one trick, I don't know where I heard this from, but it was somebody, and I used this and it helped me a ton for a while. It was, so after the wedding, I would ask the bride, like, hey, I would love to know how I did. Can you leave me a review? Mm-hmm. Also, reviews are extremely helpful for small businesses. Would you mind asking one of your bridesmaids to leave me a review as well? And not saying that, she's the bride, like she doesn't have to lie, but just say like, hey, I was a bridesmaid at one of these weddings that Raymond shot, and holy cow, it was great, or whatever, and then leave the review after that. And I think that also adds a level of, not only do you get additional reviews and more social proof, but for it to be somebody not directly the bride, I think speaks a lot to potential brides as well. So that's something that if anybody's listening, try it out, because it definitely works.
Oh, totally. And I will say too, another great client experience thing is giving them sneak peeks within the next like 24 to 48 hours. If you can, I know everybody has, life happens, but if you do the next 24 to 48 hours, they're still surrounded by people from the wedding. So if you send them even 5 images and they pick up their phone and they see 5 images, they're going to scream and they're going to show everybody around them. And that's another client experience bonus that they didn't know that they were getting. So
that is a great tip, especially because like 24 hours after a wedding, they're looking to update their Facebook.
Yeah.
What photo are they going to use? Are they going to use Uncle Bob's from down the aisle? The worst. Yeah, it might as well be yours, right? So if you can take an extra, even if it's an hour, to get 1 or 5 photos out there, huge bonus for sure. Jasmine, I know that we are at the end of our time here, but I want to ask you 2 last questions. One of them, is there anything that I didn't ask you today that you want to make sure listeners know about getting into wedding photography? And then 2, I want to know where we can find more about your course and where we can find you online.
Perfect. Yeah. So I'll disclose my course because it kind of encompasses all of that. So my course, Keeping Wedding Photography Simple: How to Book, Shoot, and Deliver Your First Wedding. It's a 90-minute, 6-module course. It's straight to the point. It's things that I have learned over the 9 years I've been shooting weddings. It's for anybody that wants to start out in wedding photography, as well as anybody that kind of feels like they're maybe plateauing and they want to, they want some direction on where to go. That is available, and I think I sent you the link. But
it'll be in the show notes.
Yeah, perfect. So the link's there, and it'll bring you to my enrollment page with a little bit more details, as well as how to enroll in the course. It's a digital course, so it's super accessible. You can do it all at once or come back here and there when you need to as well. So
perfect. And where can we find you, say, on Instagram? Where are you on all the social platforms?
Yeah, so my business is JC Photography SK for Saskatchewan. Shout out. And then my website is www.jcphotographysk.com. And I would love to hear from anybody that's listening and chat about all things weddings. I love stories and capturing them. And yeah, I guess I want to say that this course really simplifies the wedding photography business and just kind of helps you realize that it's not as complicated as you think, and it helps you be prepared to shoot a wedding, because I think that it's one of the greatest things that you can capture for people. And right now, if you think that you want to do it but you're not sure, there is a couple out there that is waiting for you to get into wedding photography, and you just got to take that jump.
What did I tell you? I have 3 big takeaways from this interview today with Jasmine Blais. The first one is, the importance of learning manual early. As a wedding photographer, I can tell you, not all venues are set up for photography. Oftentimes you find yourself in very, very difficult lighting situations. And as a wedding photographer, you are looked at to be able to create something beautiful and pleasing to look at, given less than ideal conditions. So learning manual is going to help you to be able to achieve that, right? You're going to be able to see something, you're going to know how to use your camera because you know how to shoot in manual, and then you're going to be able to capture it the way that you need to. Now, learning manual doesn't mean that every photo is going to be perfect, but it means that you're not going to be relying on your camera to make decisions, and if it makes a wrong decision, you're not going to know how to fix it. It's going to give you the tools to be able to capture the photos that you need to capture to deliver to your couples on a wedding day, in difficult lighting situation that you might find yourself in on a wedding day. All right. Takeaway number 2 was to think about asking to be an assistant rather than a second shooter if you are thinking about getting into weddings. As a wedding photographer, I would much rather say yes to somebody who asks to come to a wedding and carry my bags, help out in any way that they can, rather than somebody asking to be a second shooter. And that is because when you are the lead photographer, when you have a second shooter, you just feel almost obligated to, if they're not experienced, to help them learn what it is that they need to shoot on a wedding day, how to shoot it, kind of, then there's that awkwardness of getting to know this other person and how to work together. So asking somebody to be an assistant is much better because as the main photographer, you can focus on getting the photos that you need. And as the assistant, you can now learn the flow of a wedding day, how it goes, how to interact with your couples, with your clients, with the whole family, who they're rowdy, and how to take great portraits in less than ideal lighting conditions. And it's going to give you a ton of experience that maybe you would even miss if you were focused on being a second shooter and trying to get all the quote unquote great photos. So think about that, right? It's going to teach you how to best serve your clients in the future. And then takeaway number 3 is just having a support system to help build your skills and your confidence. I've said it before that I think that the only external source of becoming a better photographer is through community for many reasons. The biggest one is because you're going to get eyes on your work. And when you get eyes on your work, the reason why I started this podcast is because I didn't go to photo school. I went to film school to learn how to be a cinematographer. And I almost felt like a fraud, right? I had imposter syndrome being a photographer, and I wanted to be able to talk to photographers and kind of get into their head and figure out, well, what is it that you're actually thinking? How are you doing this so that I can become a better photographer? And all that is building community, right? Being able to ask those questions, getting eyes on your work so that you can see, is there anything that is standing out as it definitely needs improvement? Or is there anything that you're doing that you are just killing it at and then you can lean into deeper? So find a community, whether it is in person in your town or online. It will work just as well online if you don't have that community close by. And because of that, I highly recommend that you check out the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook community for all of those reasons. Safest place on the internet for new photographers, safe place to be able to share your photos, ask questions, and get feedback on your work. So those were my 3 main takeaways from this interview with Jasmine Blais. Now, if you've got any questions about this episode, or if you have any feedback for the show, I would love to hear from you. I want you to reach out to me directly by heading over to beginnerphotographypodcast.com and clicking the contact tab at the top of the page. There you can leave me an email, or better yet, a voicemail. Again, leave me that feedback, ask me your questions, and I will play it here on the show. So with that, that is it for this week. I want to thank you again for tuning into this episode of the Beginner Photography Podcast, brought to you by CloudSpot. Truly is the easiest way to deliver and sell photos online. And you can sign up for a free account when you head over to deliverphotos.com. Now remember, the more that you shoot today, say it with me, the better of a photographer you will be tomorrow. All right, talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to the Beginner Photography Podcast. If you enjoy the show, consider leaving a review in iTunes. Keep shooting, and we'll see you next week.